Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack here. Friday now, the second day of August 2024. Still on vacation with the family, and of course, along comes potential tropical cyclone number 4. Going to affect Florida first, so that's going to be the main part of today's update, at least the first half of it, focusing on Florida, what to expect in Florida, and then, and just in time for me to get back from said vacation, the potential impacts to the Carolinas and specifically the Outer Banks of North Carolina, still several days down the road, but we are not talking about a week or more out in time, so we're going to have to start dealing with this system sooner rather than later. Real quick as we get started though, what does PTC mean? Basically, it is a method that the National Hurricane Center started employing the last couple of years or so to designate a system that looks like it is going to develop into a tropical cyclone. That's the generic term for depression, storm, or hurricane at some point down the road that is close to land, thus warranting watches and warnings and getting that big wheel of government work in motion when a system could be threatening land. It's just a new mechanism, again, introduced over the last few years to allow those watches and warnings to go up and everything to get into play when something is expected, a disturbance that is, that's the something, to become a tropical cyclone down the road. So it's complicated, but that's what it is. Potential tropical cyclone number 4, expected, almost a shoo-in, to be Debbie eventually. All right? First of all, there's Carlotta right there, Category 1 hurricane moving out into the Pacific. No worries at all. We're going to get another system developing over here. That also really won't be a problem. So I don't want to ignore the East Pacific, but we're really going to focus on the Atlantic Basin. And with that being said, let's zoom in here. This is our interactive map off the HurricaneTrack Insider site, which, by the way, our patrons at the $10 level and higher have access to all this. And there's all kinds of layers over here that you can add with the cameras and all kinds of cool stuff. But for the tracking, it's very, very useful to show the impacts and kind of describe how things are going to unfold over the coming days with our system here. Currently located over Cuba, it's a loosely defined area of energy, showers and thunderstorms, a low pressure center, but it is not quite a true tropical depression, thus the potential tropical cyclone designation. Forecast, though, to move off Cuba into the southeast Gulf, making landfall somewhere along the west coast of Florida in the next couple of days as we get into the weekend. I know, very terrible timing. And with that being said, let's use this orange color. Anywhere south of the track, and I do mean anywhere. I'm going to show you another graphic very similar to this in just a second. That's where you're going to have the potential for storm surge. Elsewhere in this area, the potential for severe weather. These bands that could come through, tornadoes, downburst winds, especially with an intensifying system. And once this does become a tropical storm, and it is likely to do so in the eastern Gulf there, a system that is ramping up, just ask anybody in the Houston area, they just went through it with Beryl, those tend to be more pronounced than your weaker systems that are just kind of status quo, or certainly versus ones that are weakening. Now, a very intense hurricane that's coming in that's holding its own, yes, those are always just bad. But a system going from low towards its maximum, when they're in that ramping up stage, you definitely can get more exacerbated impacts with, again, downburst winds, much more noticeable, that energy getting transferred to the surface. You start to really notice that, especially in those curved bands as they come through. So heavy rainfall, big issue for Florida coming up. I'll show you the rainfall map in just a moment. Storm surge wherever you have the onshore flow, and again, that big threat potentially of tornadoes in any of those organized bands as they rotate through. Plus, you've got all these resort areas, your interstate systems, 95, 75, 4, 10 up to the north. Just not a good weekend coming up. It is a tropical system. You need to take it seriously. Don't just look at the lines and the S's and think, it's just a storm, it's nothing. Yeah, well, it's nothing until you get a tornado created from that tropical storm that takes out your nice neighborhood. Stuff like that. You got to think about it in the bigger picture. All right? So as this goes on to the north and east around the periphery, yes, more or less of the big Bermuda High, I'll show you that in just a moment, it does become a problem, it looks like, for the Carolinas up here, specifically the Outer Banks, beyond the 5-day time frame here. And yes, this explicitly shows only 60-mile-per-hour wind, but I think it is going to be stronger than that for our friends along the North Carolina Outer Banks. We'll get to that as we go forward. Here it is on the map. Again, 4, PTC 4. Already explained all that. The part I want to really show you, I'm going to box it off for you. Check this out. This is a free gift from your friends at the National Weather Service, the National Hurricane Center, the Department of Commerce, etc., so forth and so on. Everything you need to know are in these thumbnails or are in these graphics. You almost don't even need me. But I want to point stuff out to you. The rainfall, that's important. The storm surge, also very important. So let's click on a couple of these, starting with the rainfall. It is going to be heavy, anywhere in those yellows and oranges. 4 to 6 to 8 inches, maybe more, because this system will be moving slowly. So keep that in mind. What about peak surge? Now, this is just the first advisory. I fully expect that these numbers will go up a little bit. And so anywhere in this blue coloring, that's where you're going to get your onshore flow and the potential of some storm surge. And then not shown on any of these graphics is the potential for rip currents as whatever swells and waves this thing generates heads towards shore. Rip currents could be a problem as well. Just dangerous beach conditions. It's coming up on the weekend. It's Friday now. We got Saturday, Sunday to get through. As this heads towards Florida, millions of people literally are going to be down at the beaches of the west coast of Florida. And even on the east side, with any onshore flow coming around that circulation, late in the weekend, we could have some problems there. So please, please, please be careful. I truly do want to keep everybody safe. I mean, it's not just something we say in the business. You got to stay alive. And I look at it selfishly. If you're not alive, you can't watch my videos and so forth and so on, right? But seriously, be safe out there. Keep the rip current threat and certainly the storm surge threat in the front of your mind, because that could be a very big problem. There's other great products here, including the National Weather Service local products, Miami, Key West, Tampa Bay. I'm going to put a link to this itself in the description of today's video so you can just easily find it and then read these local statements. They get issued by the local offices, not computer generated, not AI, none of that stuff, no robots, or what do they call them, bots, short for robots, I know. Real people write these, even if it's based on a template, and it's updated frequently with very helpful information. Looking at Dr. Levi Cowan's dashboard of the current storms, again, you got your satellite picture. This is a still frame. I'll show you the animation in just a moment. This, though, is what I want to show you, the track guidance, especially as we look at the GFS here in just a little while. This is a great way to just get a snapshot. What are the models showing? So when people ask you, the weather expert around the office, right? Everybody's got one. Or me, who's made a career out of it, and they say, what do you think it's going to do? Well, this is a great way to sort of answer that question, because this combines most of the models, plus, very important here, the consensus. You know, you ask a bunch of people a question, political, about a product, whatever, a movie review, whatever, you get a consensus. The models are the same way. The models have operational, you've got your ensembles, so there could literally be hundreds of outcomes. What's the consensus? How do you boil it down? That is baked into here, and you can see it right here. It says, oops, sorry, let me get it, TVCN. And it's hard to see it in the tracks here, but it's there. And the general consensus of all the models is a curve into Florida, off the Florida coast into the Atlantic, very close to the North Carolina coastline, and South Carolina as we get into the early part of next week. So this is a great way to just kind of boil it all down and not have to sift through, what does this model show? What does that model show? Even though we still do that, I just want to remind you this is a great way to kind of see the big picture. And Dr. Cowan has made it easy to find over in the Current Storms tab of his very remarkable website. All right? Satellite animation time. There's Carlotta. Let's use yellow here. Don't want to completely ignore the East Pack, but there it is, moving away from land, no big deal. This is going to develop further. Also head out to sea, away from Mexico. A couple big check marks down here for you friends in Mexico. No worries for you guys. What we do need to be concerned with is our potential tropical cyclone down here. Props to anybody that saw this coming several days ago. Eric Webb was talking about it. And boy, it was all dry and anemic looking out here, embedded in the Saharan air layer. started to come to life over here. Brought some much needed rain, maybe a little too much of it even, for our friends in the Virgin Islands, and then it's worked its way through the greater Antilles, and here we are today. Now look, I also want to point out on the bigger picture here as we slide off to the east, there's PTC4. We also need to watch this. Lots of dry air still out here, the Saharan air layer, ever present it seems, but as these come across to the west and they get more favorable conditions, they start to blossom, and we got to watch that next system as well. I'll show you that in the longer term of the GFS. One of my favorite products, you hear me talk about it a lot, the vorticity signature. There it is right there, starting to come together over eastern Cuba. That's what Carlotta is, by the way, over here. It's vorticity signature. And I'm going to tell you something, that little piece of energy there is going to look a lot like Carlotta over here as it slides through and makes that turn. And we'll see what happens. I love this product. It's a satellite-derived product, the low-level vorticity, easy to spot where our trouble areas are. Why are we so bullish on this developing and the rest of the hurricane season in front of us after all? By the way, this is always a day behind. We're only on August 2nd. We got about 90 days of peak season coming up, and we're going to have a lot of activity. We've got PTC4 sitting down here. All this anomalously warm water, warmer than it should be, warmer than the long-term average, that's waiting for it. We've got the very rich, deep area of above normal anomalies in the main development region. I mean, the recipe is there. We've been talking about it for months and months, and we're probably starting to see the beginnings now of a very active period coming up. And this just continues to just blow my mind. I don't recall seriously ever seeing this large of an area of 31 Celsius. We're talking about 88, 89 degrees, something like that, Fahrenheit. Very, very warm. These are your actual sea surface temperatures, not your anomalies. These are actual temperatures. And so our system's going to come through and take advantage of that. And, you know, even when it goes by, all this is going to be undisturbed. Plus, with it only being August 2nd, anything that does get disturbed and mixed up over here, and it's pretty shallow, relatively speaking, will probably bounce back very quickly for the remainder of hurricane season. We just got to look at the reality of this stuff and try to be as ready for it as we can be. That's my job. Now, I am also concerned for our friends in the Outer Banks, and I'm going to show you at the end of today's update, it's kind of ironic, Hurricane Alex, 20 years ago, not the same kind of origin, but a very similar end game for the path near North Carolina, and then 10 years after was Hurricane Arthur, and now 10 years after Arthur, 2024, right? Alex was 04, Arthur 14. We're going to have a similar setup here with Debbie. Very interesting how the pattern, you know, almost kind of repeats itself, even if the beginning part is not exactly identical. But the water temperatures off the North Carolina Outer Banks, even though our first concern right now is Florida, very warm, 28, 29 Celsius. You've got the Gulf Stream sitting out there. Problematic for sure. I would not be surprised. Don't sleep on this, okay? Busy weekend coming up. Lots of people heading to the Outer Banks. Your weekend is going to be great. Early next week, though, Monday into Tuesday, right as I get back from this family vacation that, you know, again, I've tried to focus on the vacation, but I've had my eyes on this. We're going to have a field mission. That's what it looks like to my home area of eastern North Carolina. And you guys don't sleep on this out there on the Outer Banks. I fully expect that this will become a hurricane, and I'll show you some of my reasoning here as we look at the modeling. Now remember, this is the GFS deterministic. It is part of all of these models. But this is just one, so just please keep that in mind. One model, the deterministic GFS, which, by the way, has done a good job so far of keeping track of our system. The Euro has been close, but the GFS, I think, has led the way. There's the energy right there. PTC4 doesn't look like much sitting over Cuba. Let's move this out into time. It gradually gets better organized. There it is in the extreme southeast Gulf. Keys, Saturday afternoon. Probably pretty stormy down there. Sorry, it's hurricane season. It happens. Finally, it comes around, starts to get better organized. When it does so, how quickly it can do so will determine the extent of the impacts, obviously. For Florida, it crosses Florida almost up the I-4 corridor. It doesn't miss it by much. And then into the southwest Atlantic. And notice, we got our Bermuda high sitting out here. Literally, right, there's Bermuda. right near Bermuda. And this is just riding the western side of that Bermuda high. And also remember, these high pressure areas are like big bubbles of air. They breathe in and they breathe out. Well, not literally, but you get the idea. They expand, they change their shape, and how this flexes the Bermuda high over the next few days will determine how close this tracks to the North and South Carolina coastlines. So just keep that in mind as we go through. It comes up, starts to look much better organized. This is late Monday night, hopefully right about the time I get home, and then I'm going to have to hit the road like almost immediately, because this starts to really ramp up there, very slow moving. Let's back it up. The slowest movement looks to start there, about 100 hours out or so, Tuesday into Wednesday, a very close shave, if not a landfall, along the southern Outer Banks there, really piling up the water in the Pamlico Sound. Very, very similar to Hurricane Alex 20 years ago, and then it goes on out into the Atlantic from there. And just to broaden the shot, so you can see how this ends up. There we go. By the way, the internet, I'm on a cruise ship if you didn't figure that out already, is pretty darn good. So this goes on through not far off the coast of New England and the Canadian Maritimes. So we got to keep that in mind as well. But this is farther out in time, further out in time. Farther, I hate that. I wish it could just be one word. But you get the idea. We got to watch this even as it leaves the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Very similar, again, to Alex 20 years ago. And then, just to show you, at about a week's time, we really have to watch that, which is that system I showed you out here. Let me just go back to remind you. Been on this video for quite a while now. That one. That right there is on the GFS here, as I was just showing you, this little feature here in about a week's time. And where that ends up could be very interesting. I know you can look at it yourselves, but we'll just stop it at a week. All right? Zooming in on things just a little bit, I want to show you the wind impacts. This is your 10-meter wind. So pretty much where you and I live, 10 meters. Most, structures, 10 meters or so. Cars are like 2 meters. But yeah, we get some onshore flow there. 20, 30 knots or so. That's, not nothing. Can certainly pile up the water in some of those onshore flow areas. Then the system gets offshore, very close to North and South Carolina. And then there's my concern. It rapidly strengthens. Doesn't necessarily meet rapid intensification parameters, but it definitely deepens pretty quick from the upper 990s to the 970s in pretty short order, with hurricane force winds very close to, if not over, parts of the Outer Banks, and then it goes on up, expanding as it goes, and we'll have to watch that very closely for our friends in New England and Atlantic Canada. All right? So, again, 20 years ago, very similar. Tropical Storm Alex, this was the 11 a.m. advisory on August 2nd, 20 years ago, and it was expected to move parallel to the coast, but not close enough to warrant too much concern. Although Jesse Bass, John Van Pelt, and myself, we were watching it very carefully. This is the discussion from that day. This is the map. Hey, it looks familiar, doesn't it? It ends up that Alex actually passed closer, almost made landfall right there in the Hatteras Village area, Cape Hatteras itself. I will look at that for you tomorrow, because tomorrow, August 3rd, 2004, 20 years ago, we were out there. And I'll show you Jesse's story that he wrote up about it over at his website, and I'll point you in the direction of our documentary that we did about it, Tracking the Hurricanes 2004. Just kind of looking back at the start of this entire amazing field project that we have now, called internally the Hurricane Landfall Project, one of the hallmarks of what HurricaneTrack has accomplished over the last 20 to 25 years. By the way, you're probably watching this on YouTube. That's where most people consume my videos, and I do appreciate that. Please subscribe to the channel, and here's all of our awesome stuff for you, playlists, even some 360 videos. If you look for them, they are in there. So check it out, subscribe to our channel, and when we go live, make sure you do that notification bell, and you'll know when we're live, because it looks like as soon as I get home, I'm going to have to get stuff ready. My colleague Marcel. And by the way, we're not completely caught. Well, Mark's on a cruise ship somewhere. blah, whatever. No. We got a back-end team that's getting ready. We got Marcel Legabo he's from Brazil, up in Raleigh. He's from Brazil, up in the Raleigh area. I say Raleigh area, he's close to it. I think it was a Fuquay Arena or something like that. He's going to be getting stuff ready. We're going to get out there as soon as they get back and cover this in the Carolinas. CJ down in Florida will be providing some info to us as well. And we're on top of it, even as I'm off the coast of Alaska here on the awesome Quantum of the Seas. All right? Let me get this online for you. By the way, their internet, I might have said it earlier, fantastic. I'll be able to upload this in about 20 minutes, even off the coast of incredible Alaska. All right, you guys have a good rest of your Friday. I am Mark Sudduth from all of us at HurricaneTrack. Thanks for watching. I'll be back with another video for you early tomorrow morning.